Chicago, 1990. A city of steel nerves and slow-burn winters, where cash moves in brown envelopes and secrets travel faster than the wind off the lake. Just after opening hour, a quiet branch on the south side felt the temperature drop. A figure in an artificial beard crossed the threshold like a shadow that had learned to walk. A handheld scanner murmuring police traffic in his pocket. A semi-automatic held with the steadiness of a marksman who'd done this before. The take was fast, too fast. And when the teller finally breathed again, the phantom was gone, leaving only silence, shaking hands, and a checklist that told the story of a professional. Most bank thieves fumble, panic, talk too much, then land in cuffs by dinner. Not this man. He moved like a person who studied procedure, not rumor, and he carried himself with the almost polite menace of someone who expected and received compliance. Agents who read crime scenes like musicians read charts, FBI men who had seen their share of amateurs, took one look at the paperwork and felt it in their bones. This wasn't first offense. This was a rehearsal made perfect. Supervisory senior resident agent Bill Keefe's crew logged the patterns, measured the timing, and marked the calm. Something about the economy of it, the clinical pace, said this bandit had a plan with chapters, not pages. 2 months later, north of the city in Libertyville, the beard returned. Same cool cadence, same scanner, same soft-spoken threat that carried more weight than shouting ever could. This time he didn't settle for register money. He asked for the vault, and he said it with the unruffled confidence of a man who knew patrol cars by their response time. A teller watched him leave and wrote down a license plate. Good intel, bad luck. The car turned out to be stolen and left a few blocks away, the ignition broken and neatly veiled under a paper towel, as if modesty applied to felonies. Libertyville police did their part. The Bureau Bank squad did the rest, comparing tapes and timestamps, filing away his steady hands and short speeches for later. By then, the rumor mill had a nickname ready, the Bearded Bandit. But the agents were working off something stronger than rumor. In an earlier Wilmette holdup, a security camera had caught his stance, two-handed, balanced, textbook, what old-school instructors called a Weaver stance. That detail rang like a struck bell inside the Chicago office. Training leaves a signature. Training leaves habits. To veterans like Special Agents Hank Schmidt and Dave Childry, that posture said the quiet part out loud. Whoever this ghost was, he'd either worn a badge or lived close to those who did, which many knew how investigations began, how they moved, and how, if one wasn't careful, they ended. The press fed on the mystery. The Bureau fed on the method. The robberies never overlapped jurisdictions twice. 1 week a suburb brushed by Lake Michigan. The next a drive time away, Schaumburg, Elk Grove. Then back north as if he were drawing a circle only he could see. He chose work days and windows that pushed police resources to their limits. Noisy enough to distract, quiet enough to vanish. He stole his getaway vehicles days in advance from sprawling mall lots where employees leave sedans for 8-hour shifts, an old magician's trick dressed in modern tin. By the time anyone dialed in the theft, the car had served its purpose and changed hands, from heat to cold. Abandoned again, wiped clean, another towel tucked over another fractured ignition. To technicians in windbreakers and latex gloves, it looked less like theft and more like staging. Every new file landed on the same table at the Chicago FBI, and the same names kept showing up on the routing sheets. Keefe coordinating, Schmidt interviewing tellers who couldn't quite remember the eyes, Childry walking the canvas with locals, building rapport, looking for that one witness who notices what other witnesses miss. The squad wasn't just comparing notes. They were building a moving map. Time delays on vault doors, average response intervals, where scanners chirped loudest, even the way the bandit paced while he spoke. Patterns make pressure points. Pressure points make opportunities. That's Bureau doctrine, and in Chicago, doctrine has a way of becoming practice. Then came wheeling, and with it, escalation. A clerk, young, composed, triggered the alarm a heartbeat early. Through the bandit scanner, the room filled with the distant footfalls of patrol cars, sirens threading the air. But the intruder did not run. He stayed. He counted down, calm as a metronome. The gun held steady, the lesson implicit. Panic is a luxury. 10, 9, until he had what he needed. The message reached every desk that mattered. This adversary knew the rhythm of a police response, right down to the second hand. To bank employees, it was terror. To the FBI, it was data. To both, it was unforgettable. By late 90 into 91, the robber had threaded 7 assaults into the suburbs like beads on a wire, and then, without warning, the string went slack. Months without a hit. The streets exhaled. The task force did not. Keith's team gathered everything that wasn't nailed down. Stolen car timelines, mall security logs, police radio traffic, and pushed it through the grinder again. Maybe he'd been arrested on an unrelated charge. Maybe he'd moved. Maybe he'd found a different line of work. But in the unit where hunches are shelved beside hard proof, the prevailing instinct said this. Men who plan like that don't retire, they wait. And so the Bureau prepared for a return, setting new protocols with local departments. If the bandit had a scanner, then the airwaves would be bait rather than blueprint. Dispatchers swapped addresses for coded bank IDs. Response units trained to converge without broadcasting their path. Agents briefed patrol officers across jurisdictions, cautioning them on the suspect's comm, his method, his possible training, advice delivered face-to-face in roll call rooms, so the message would stick long after the coffee cooled. Where cities don't get safer by accident, they get safer because someone decides to do the hard, careful thing, quietly, consistently, at scale. The calm broke on a clear November morning in Palatine, a routine traffic stop, nothing more, nothing less, until it was. A patrolman rolled behind a sedan, lights up, the vehicle braked hard, the world snapped, and muzzle flashes stitched the windshield. The officer's first instinct wasn't survival. It was protection, shielding the rookie riding with him. He lived. His story would matter for the Bureau. The equation changed in a single burst. The robber wasn't just disciplined. He was willing to fire on law enforcement in daylight, on a neighborhood street. Constraints vanished. The hunt became urgent. The hunt became now. Within hours, the Chicago office folded the shooting into the bank robbery series. Keith looked at the recovered getaway car. The same towel-draped ignition, the same clinical absence prints, and knew it in an instant. Their bearded bandit had just raised the stakes. The public would remember the nickname. The Bureau would remember the tactics. In the days that followed, FBI coordinators stitched together a multi-jurisdictional net. State police, county units, big city detectives, small-town sergeants, all rowing in rhythm. And at the center of that rhythm, agents in Bureau Blue kept time, methodical, relentless, patient, because the only thing sharper than a professional criminal's plan is a plan built to stop him. The winter of 91 dragged heavy across the suburbs, but for the men in Bureau windbreakers, the season meant long nights and longer coffee. The bearded bandit had vanished after spraying bullets at a Palatine patrol car, and yet the task force knew, deep down, that predators like him don't retire. They regroup. They wait for the next perfect angle. So the FBI widened the lens. They told local precincts to stop thinking in incidents and start thinking in patterns. The robber always stole his wheels the same way. Ordinary sedans, lifted from sprawling mall lots, taken just as employees clocked in for a long shift. Those cars wouldn't be reported missing until dusk, giving him a comfortable window. Each was abandoned soon after a job. Its ignition snapped and modestly dressed with a folded paper towel. That ritual became his fingerprint, more telling than the fake beard. The Bureau asked every suburban department to feed them lists of stolen vehicles that matched the profile. It was tedious work. Clerks leafing through reports, agents dragging maps across conference tables. But it paid off. 2 cars surfaced that felt right. One in Niles, another in Rolling Meadows. Both snatched from mall parking lots. Both sitting quietly, untouched, like props on a stage. That's when the FBI tightened the noose. Surveillance teams were planted in borrowed apartments and unmarked vans. Glass pointed down at the cars below. Around the clock, agents watched, ate cold sandwiches, scribbled logs of nothing happening. Because with this adversary, nothing had turned into everything in a single minute. They grew restless, yes, but not reckless. Patience was their edge. Then came the riskier move. Bureau technicians slipped in during the dead of night. They swapped the parked sedans with identical stand-ins, hustled the originals into a garage, and worked surgical magic, installing tracking devices, remote kill switches, layers of insurance for when the curtain finally rose. Before dawn, the cars were back in place, indistinguishable from the night before. Days crawled by. Shadows stretched across windshields. Nothing. Some agents whispered they'd been burned, that maybe Erickson had spotted a tail or sensed a trap. But orders were clear. Hold. Wait. Keep the rhythm steady. And then a van rolled into view. A man climbed out, his movements careful but not suspicious, and approached the stolen sedan. Surveillance agents stiffened in their seats. This was it. The script had flipped. They logged the details, followed at a distance, let the tracker hum. The suspect parked the car near a suburban bank. Another stage set, another move in the play. Supervisory Special Agent Bill Keefe heard the call and knew in his gut. They finally had their man in motion. This wasn't a rumor anymore. It wasn't a ghost story. It was a hunt, and now the Bureau had teeth in the trail. License plates were run. Databases hummed. And the names came back. Jeffrey and Jill Erickson. On paper, they looked ordinary. A husband, a wife, a suburban address. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. But the file had edges sharp enough to draw blood. Jeffrey Erickson, once patrol officer in a nearby suburb. A marksman by reputation. Notorious at the range of precision. But restless with the routine of ticket books and traffic stops. He'd resigned before his superiors could push him out. That explained the Weaver stance. That explained the calm under pressure. And Jill, bright, educated, a chemistry student at the university. Together they ran a small bookstore, a veneer of middle-class stability. Yet beneath that cover was another life. Funded by stacks of cash torn from vaults and drawers, disguised by beards and wigs. They were living on the money of a dozen robberies, playing Bonnie and Clyde in the quiet neighborhoods of Illinois. Inside the Bureau Chicago office, the pieces began to settle into place. Special Agent Hank Schmidt sketched the profile. A train hand on the trigger, a wife in on the game, disguises bought and burned, getaway cars stolen with surgical precision. Special Agent Dave Childrey walked the timeline on the board, linking mall theft to robberies, robberies to vanishing cars. And Bill Keefe, the man holding the reins, cautioned his team that an adversary with police training was not just clever, he was lethal. The FBI debated the next move. They could wait until Jeffrey showed at another bank, catch him mid-crime. But that risked chaos. Civilians, tellers, clerks caught in crossfire. The safer play was patience. Let him reach for one of the booby-trapped cars again, then close the jaws before he had time to draw. Swat was briefed. Surveillance continued. In an empty apartment across from the Rolling Meadows car, agents kept their nerves steady. Curtains cracked just enough to watch. Every cigarette stubbed out, every thermos of coffee emptied, carried the same unspoken truth. When the bearded bandit came back, there would be no second chances. Jeffrey Erickson was no longer a faceless phantom. He was flesh, blood, and record, and the Bureau intended to take him alive. Word came across the radio. Movement. A van eased into the lot, its tires whispering across the asphalt. The driver stepped out, built solid, deliberate in every gesture. He walked the sedan, slid behind the wheel, and turned the ignition. That was the cue. FBI technicians, huddled blocks away with receivers in hand, flicked the switch. The engine died mid-breath. Jeffrey Erickson frowned, tapped the dash, tried again. Nothing. A mechanic's problem, he thought. A hunter's opportunity. The Bureau knew. Go, go, go. The command cracked through headsets. SWAT surged. Unmarked cars boxed a sedan from three sides. Weapons leveled. Agents barked their orders, voices iron-edged but steady. Erickson hesitated, hands drifting toward the canvas bag by his seat. Twice he reached. Twice. The agents nearly fired. Finally, he yielded, raising his arms, stepping out into the cold morning light. The bag was his undoing. Inside, the makings of his double life. A loaded handgun, a police scanner tuned to local frequencies, gloves, a wig, and the false beard that had turned him into a phantom. Every item was evidence. Every piece of nail in the coffin of his anonymity. As they cuffed him, Erickson's composure never cracked. Special Agent Dave Childrey rode with him afterward and asked the question every cop-turned-criminal should expect. You knew reaching for that bag could have gotten you killed, didn't you? Erickson's reply was chilling in its calm. I figured you'd shoot me in the head, and it would be over quick. But the Bureau had no interest in quick endings. They wanted a trial, a record, and justice that left no cracks for escape. Meanwhile, the van that had delivered Erickson was still in play. Agents swarmed it, weapons raised, bracing for Jill Erickson inside. But when the door swung open, she wasn't waiting quietly. The chase that followed ripped through 11 suburban jurisdictions, the van roaring at 110 miles an hour, bullets snapping from its windows. Jill was no passenger. She was a partner, a co-conspirator, and now a cornered fugitive who would rather go out blazing than surrender. On that day, the Bureau realized the bearded bandit was never a lone wolf. He was one half of a pact, and the next act would be even bloodier. The van tore across the northern suburbs like a steel animal with no leash. Jill Erickson gripped the wheel, her disguise half askew, her pistol spitting rounds through the back window. Sirens chased her, lights clawed at the dusk, but she drove as if the whole world was a racetrack she meant to win or die on. FBI convoys and local units fell in line, a multi-jurisdictional storm, pushing speeds that made every swerve a coin toss. Civilians scattered, cars skidded aside, but Jill kept her foot pressed flat, as though acceleration alone might outrun the law. She wasn't running to safety. She was running to keep a promise. The agents knew it. Her husband's words had already painted the outline. The Ericksons had a pact. Never surrender, never see the inside of a cell. And Jill meant to honor it. Tire spikes failed. Roadblocks crumpled under the van's weight. Bullets snapped against squad cars. Every mile raised the stakes, and every decision was measured against the Bureau's mandate. Stop the threat, but spare the innocent. At last, Jill turned into a dead-end stretch, a cul-de-sac with no escape. The van lurched, swayed, cornered like a beast. Agents closed in, weapons drawn. She fired again, wild, furious, desperate. Then silence. When the dust settled, Jill Erickson was found slumped behind the wheel, a single self-inflicted shot ending her part of the story. The chase was over, but the violence of her choice echoed through the ranks of those who had pursued her. That night, the FBI searched the Ericksons' home. What they found turned theory into certainty. This couple had prepared for war. Assault rifles leaned in corners where most families kept umbrellas. Handguns lined bedside tables. Ammunition stacked like firewood. The house was less a home than an arsenal disguised with knickknacks. On the television, a VCR still hummed. In the slot, a copy of Bonnie and Clyde. The tape had been paused at the moment of the outlaw couple's bloody end, as if the Ericksons had studied it not as entertainment, but as rehearsal. It was proof that their story was never meant to close with handcuffs. It was always meant to close with gunfire. But the Bureau had no time for dramatics. They logged every weapon, every round, every detail that tied the Ericksons to their spree. The FBI had cracked the case, pulled the curtain back, and revealed the phantom. Yet the story was not finished. Jeffrey Erickson still had a date with the courts. And in the halls of justice, he would prove that his pact with Jill was far from broken. July 1992. The trial of Jeffrey Erickson opened with all the weight of the Bureau's work behind it. Evidence lined the courtroom walls. Photographs of disguises, surveillance stills, the cache of weapons from his home. Prosecutors built their case brick by brick, and by all accounts, the wall was closing in. Inside the courthouse, Erickson sat in a crisp suit, expression flat, as though he were a spectator at someone else's trial. But under the surface, the same man who had once studied the rhythm of police sirens was studying something else, the rhythm of federal custody. On July 20th, after court adjourned for the day, U.S. Marshals loaded Erickson and other prisoners into an elevator. The plan was simple: ride down, board the van, transfer to the correctional center. Routine, safe, predictable. But Jeffrey Erickson never trusted routines. He exploited them. Somewhere between the courtroom and the garage, he slipped his cuffs. By the time the elevator doors opened, the man known as the Bearded Bandit had a weapon in his hand. The first to fall was Deputy U.S. Marshal Bill Frakes. Young, just 9 months into service, struck down before he could draw. Erickson moved with the cold efficiency of a man who had trained for this moment, not just dreamed of it. He burst toward the street level, a heartbeat away from vanishing into the crowded city. But fate, or perhaps justice, had stationed another lawman in his path. Court Security Officer Harry Belwomini, a veteran of 31 years in Chicago blue, stood ready. Erickson fired, hitting him in the chest. Wounded, dying, Belwomini returned fire. 4 shots, enough to bring the outlaw down before he reached freedom. When the smoke cleared, 2 men lay dead, 1 marshal at the dawn of his career, 1 security officer who had spent a lifetime serving his city. Erickson's body lay beside theirs, his final escape written in blood and gunpowder for the Bureau. The case had ended not with a verdict, but with a lesson. Even the most meticulous investigation cannot always control the final chapter. Yet their work had mattered. It had exposed Erickson, dismantled his arsenal, and proven to the public that the FBI could unravel even the most disciplined, dangerous predator stalking America's banks. The bearded bandit had lived by a pact: never surrender, never bow. And in the end, he kept it. But the price was high, and the Bureau made sure his story would be remembered not as legend, but as warning.